Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on health ethics harmonization across Canada. I would like to remind the audience members that this presentation is being recorded, so please make sure that you know that in advance. It will be made available publicly on RITHIM's website, and the link will be sent out to you after this event. If you have any questions, the second hour of our webinar will be open to Q&As, and you can use the Q&A box on the side. If you have any technical questions, you can also place them in the Q&A box, and I will be able to assist you. I will hand over the webinar now to Karen Dunlop, CEO of Research Manitoba.
Hello. I'm Karen Dunlop, CEO of Research Manitoba. It is my honor to welcome you to this webinar today, bringing us together as representatives from across the country to talk about goals and history of research ethics harmonization. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge that we are hosting this event on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories and acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past and dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership in the spirit of reconciliation. So Research Manitoba launched Research Improvements Through Harmonization in Manitoba, or RITHIM, in 2014 as a result of extensive consultations with health researchers and stakeholders across the province. Our aim is to harmonize all of the many ethics, privacy, and institutional feasibility or impact applications and reviews into one streamlined system. While the scope of harmonization in Manitoba is unique, through this process we have learned about and learned from many other harmonization movements in Canada. In all jurisdictions, we encountered common challenges, complexity, delays, and a lack of transparency. We also have common goals to maintain high standards and quality of review, reduce red tape, reduce time to conduct, and create the right systems and foster an environment that supports the important work of health researchers. Each of our participants today is involved in a different aspect of harmonization in a variety of jurisdictions. The Canadian Collaboration for Child Health, Efficiency and Excellence in Ethics Review of Research, or CHEER, is a Canada-wide initiative to improve child health by streamlining research ethics review for multi-site, multi-jurisdictional child health research. CHEER is represented at this event by their project manager, Samantha Drover. From the West, Terry Fleming is the Director of Research Ethics BC, where they facilitate a harmonized ethics review process in a single system for over 22 REBs. They are among the first ethics harmonization system to launch in Canada. In Manitoba, Freya Arneson, Director of RITHIM, will represent our organization because she knows more about it than anyone else. RITHIM is unique in harmonizing both research ethics and privacy reviews while also streamlining the institutional impact reviews through our system. We're in production of our software and will begin a soft launch of our system in 2021. A pan-Canadian approach to research ethics review, or CARE, is a collaboration between the Ontario Cancer Research Ethics Board, or OCREB, and stakeholders that include cancer in Manitoba, that include Cancer Care, University of Manitoba, and Research Manitoba. CARE explores the streamlining of REB reviews and is represented today by Antonia Palmer, a child health care advocate and pediatric community member for OCREB. Over in the Maritimes, we have Nova Scotia Health Research Innovation, represented by Dr. Marie Tremblay. Nova Scotia is a notable province for creating a province-wide REB that is completely paperless and works to serve all different regions of the province in one central location. I'm excited to learn more from each of these talented, passionate research administrators in the coming hour. Please join me in welcoming them to our webinar.
Representing RITHIM is Freya Arneson.
Hi, everyone. My name is Freya Arneson. I am the Director of Research Improvements through Harmonization in Manitoba. Thank you, Karen, for your welcoming remarks. And thank you, Hope, for troubleshooting any technical issues that we might run into today. Fingers crossed that does not happen. And Hope will also be moderating the Q&A portion of the webinar towards the end. So I'm really excited to learn from everybody who is participating and presenting today. I'm looking forward to sharing an update with you on what RITHIM is, what harmonization looks like in Manitoba, and some of the challenges and successes that we've encountered as we work towards implementing our new harmonized system. I'd like to start my presentation with a video that provides a brief overview of what RITHIM is. And after the video, I'll speak to some of the challenges and wins and provide an update on the initiative. So Hope, if you could play the video, that'd be great.
Yes, I'm just loading it right now, sorry.
Okay. Bear with us. This worked mostly when we practiced.
Welcome to RITHIM, Research Improvements through Harmonization in Manitoba. Over the last number of years, many provinces in Canada have been exploring ways to improve the administrative processes related to health research. In Manitoba, we have taken a unique approach to harmonization, which includes streamlining ethics, privacy, and institutional impact reviews. This initiative is called RITHIM. The main goals of RITHIM are to reduce time to conduct for researchers and attract important trials and investment to the province through creating a harmonized, efficient, and transparent process. The current system in Manitoba for the review of health research is complex and fragmented. RITHIM seeks to improve time to conduct for researchers by creating one process supported by an electronic system that will harmonize ethics and privacy reviews and streamline the institutional impact reviews of health research. RITHIM does not replace the need for approvals, it harmonizes them, making the process easier, faster, and focused. It's important to note that RITHIM also does not replace the need for existing processes related to culturally appropriate reviews by Indigenous communities and research ethic boards. RITHIM's key components will include a brand new software application that combines the application forms for ethics, privacy, and institutional impact reviews from across Manitoba into one system. This system will launch in phases beginning in July 2021. The second component is the new Harmonized Review Committee called CHIPR, or the Committee for Harmonized Health Impact, Privacy, and Ethics Review, which combines members from research ethic boards and privacy boards in Manitoba. RITHIM staff will provide the administrative support necessary to support CHIPR in their work reviewing applications and guide the goals of the harmonization initiative to best serve the research community in Manitoba. RITHIM's activities will be guided by the PRC, or the Provincial RITHIM Committee. This committee is responsible for the nominations to CHIPR and reports on RITHIM's performance. So what does all this mean for researchers? When the system launches later this year, submitting to CHIPR will enable researchers to experience a streamlined process, a single electronic application form, transparency and tracking in the review process, and timely communication of decisions for ethics, privacy, and institutional impact review. How do researchers know if they need to apply to CHIPR or to a different ethics board at their institution? We have identified a series of routing questions that will help researchers determine if research needs to come to CHIPR for review. We encourage everyone to review these questions early in the planning stages for their research. These questions are currently available on our website at rithim.ca. RITHIM is also in the process of developing pre-submission resources to help researchers identify everything they need to consider before they submit to CHIPR. There will be two ways for a researcher to access our application form. University of Manitoba affiliated researchers will need to apply to CHIPPR through the University of Manitoba system, which will also be launched later this year. If there is no affiliation with the University of Manitoba, a researcher will access our system and set up an account through the software portal on RITHIM's website. Please note that our system is still under development and not currently active. We will be working with all of our stakeholders to prepare for launch later this year. What is CHIPPR's review process? First, a researcher will take required online training to learn how to facilitate the submission of an error-free application that will not be delayed unnecessarily due to things like unanswered questions or missing documents. Then, a researcher will fill out an electronic application form. The application will be screened by RITHIM staff to ensure that the application is relevant to CHIPPR's mandated areas of review. RITHIM staff will also verify the completeness of the application, and then the application will be assigned to the appropriate CHIPPR board. Simultaneously, the application will be sent out for institutional impact review and privacy review until FIA legislation changes. CHIPPR will then meet monthly to review applications, and decisions will be communicated to the applicant through the electronic system. For more information on RITHIM, please visit our website at rithim.ca. On the website, you'll find our standard operating procedures, as well as background information on our history, governance structure, and other helpful resources for researchers. We will inform the community on a regular basis to prepare our stakeholders for the changes that are coming later this year. If you'd like to keep up to date on RITHIM as we advance research in Manitoba, please subscribe to the RITHIM newsletter at rithim.ca, follow Research Manitoba on Twitter, and visit our website.
Hi, Freya, you're back up.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Hope, and thanks everyone for watching the video. I hope that provided a good background on what the initiative is, what our scope is, and now I'd like to talk a little bit about our journey towards harmonization, some of our challenges, some of our key successes, and where we're at right now. So I'm going to share my screen. Bear with me for a minute. And there we go. Okay, so I think the video provided a good background for you. The key goals for harmonization are improving time to conduct for researchers in the province. And our current system is fairly fragmented, and we're looking at creating one unified, harmonized system. So the journey to harmonization in Manitoba really began with increasing awareness of current challenges and the desire for improvement. Health researchers in the province expressed frustration with the current processes and identified the potential lost opportunities for important research investments that resulted from having such a fragmented system. Senior leaders and government listened to those frustrations and took action. A steering committee was formed to map out the existing system, and recommendations were developed as to how to improve and harmonize processes. And Research Manitoba was asked to implement those recommendations through the RITHIM initiative. RITHIM is still in development, so I can't yet speak to the challenges and successes related to the real life operations of a newly harmonized system, but I can speak to some of the successes and challenges that we've encountered in our planning and implementation process. So I'm going to start with our successes. A key win for RITHIM has been the creation of a shared vision. RITHIM was created by a wide array of stakeholders in the province. We've had senior level support from researchers, post-secondary institutions, the health system, the government, and we have had the necessary investment to take that shared vision and turn it into a reality. That shared vision for harmonization has created a solid foundation on which we can build. Collaboration is our other major success. RITHIM cannot be built in a silo. It involves changes to legislation, to policies, and it touches all post-secondary institutions and the health system in Manitoba. So this means that we need to work closely with our stakeholders to make that vision become a reality. For example, we're working very closely with Shared Health to support their lead and coordinate role related to the streaming of impact or feasibility reviews. We have a very close partnership with the University of Manitoba, and we're sharing software that will support the new harmonized review process. We're working with the government and with the Health Information Privacy Committee, first to align and then ultimately to harmonize reviews around access to data. I'd also like to mention the really important collaborations that we've built across Canada with many of the speakers that are on this webinar. So much important work has already been done by other provinces, and we have asked for advice, borrowed materials and templates, and learned from the best practices that have been established in other jurisdictions. So the spirit of openness and shared collaboration has really been remarkable. And now we get to our challenges. And I had to share this image because our process engineer and I have sent it to each other numerous times as we have worked with our stakeholders to map out all the existing processes. As I'm sure you know, and I know that this is not unique to Manitoba, review processes have developed over decades and have been influenced by a variety of factors. Understanding all of those factors and revealing the complexity and interdependencies of many of these processes has been hard work, and it's often felt like peeling back the layers of an onion. Every time we think we understand it all, we learn about some other form or layer of approval or special circumstance that needs to be accounted for. And sorting through these processes and establishing best practice as we harmonize has been hard, challenging work. Another challenge has been culture change. So harmonizing and streamlining processes is more than just creating an electronic system and a harmonized review committee to really support the goals of harmonization, which are efficiency, improved time to conduct. We need to help support the idea that we can do things differently and that we should do things better. This last year has really demonstrated the critical importance of health research, and it's also revealed new possibilities and paths for enabling research without sacrificing the important safeguards that we have in place to protect people. So we want to support a lasting shift in mindset towards enabling research. And through education, through establishing communities of practice, collaboration, and the creation of best practice standards, we know that we can both support research and protect people and their privacy. So to provide you a little bit of a sense of where we're at in our implementation process, we've been working on RITHIM for quite a few years. Recently, we've had a change in leadership. So Karen Dunlop is our new CEO, and she just joined us a couple of months ago. We've been working on some fine tuning to the governance structure to optimize the effectiveness, and really working to support the critical role of Shared Health in leading and coordinating impact reviews that will be streamlined through RITHIM. The current focus of our work is really around the IT system development. So that's harmonizing all of those paper-based application forms into one electronic system. And we also are working on some legal agreements, delegation of authority agreements that will allow RITHIM to conduct their reviews. And then of course, transition planning is a big piece of the work that we're doing. We've recently added some additional resources to fast track our implementation. And we plan on taking a phased approach to launch, beginning as early as the summer of 2021. So this spring, we'll see the final but critical stages of RITHIM implementation, and we'll be driving towards a phased implementation that starts in the summer of 2021. As you know, RITHIM is a multi-stakeholder initiative. We rely on the input and cooperation of all of our partners in the health research community to make it work. We're looking forward to working with everyone to prepare for these changes. And I think that RITHIM will really help shine a light on the amazing capacity and opportunities for research that exist in Manitoba. So if you have any questions about RITHIM, are interested in learning more about what we're doing here in Manitoba, please feel free to reach out anytime. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Hope to introduce our next presenter.
Thanks, Freya. Our next presenter will be Marie Tremblay from Nova Scotia.
All right, well, thank you, Hope, and thank you for the organizers for inviting me to this exciting panel discussion. So my name is Marie Tremblay, and I'm the Research Ethics Board Manager here at Nova Scotia Health. And today I'm going to talk to you about these new initiatives that we actually started in the last year with the implementation of a clinical trials unit. So a little bit on Nova Scotia Health. We are a brand new organization. So on April 1st in 2015, the Nova Scotia Health Authority was created through the consolidation of Nova Scotia's 9 district health authorities into one. Today, we have about 23,400 employees, 2,000 physicians, about 400 to 500 medical students, a lot of volunteers and learners, and a few foundations and community health boards. But really what defines us in a way in research is the REB's history and the early harmonization efforts that happened over the last 15 years. So in 2005, we were 9 health districts in one province of about 1 million in population, and we had 9 research ethics boards. In 2007, there was a recognized need for some standardization because with 9 different research ethics boards in one province, there's a lot of red tape and not a lot of continuity or standardization. So there was an understanding to create a standardized form among different REBs and also a standardized consent form for clinical trial conduct. In 2008 and 2009, there was a province-wide REB harmonization program that was designed where these standardized forms have seen the light as templates. Common submission documents were also implemented. And this is where the multi-site review board concept started, where the overall coordinated through Halifax. This was also the time where we implemented video conferencing and standardized education opportunities for the whole province. In 2011-2012, the Council of CEOs for the health authorities granted approval for a multi-site REB. So this is when our REB actually went provincial. One REB to rule them all, as one would say. So memorandums of understandings were created for sharing information between different districts across the province. SOPs were created, and this is also when we started looking at implementing IT solutions for the REB ethics review. So this is where Romeo was brought on board as our electronic data management solution. In 2015, the Nova Scotia Health Authority was born. And this is also when Romeo, our electronic data management, was also fully implemented. So this is when we went full on electronic and no more paper. And now, in the past year, we've actually went back to the drawing board to continue designing and harmonizing our efforts. And this next picture is really why we're doing this. So as you can see, most of our research efforts are concentrated in Halifax and a little bit out in Sydney and Cape Breton, but nowhere else across the province. So access to research has been a huge problem in our province. So a little glimpse of our ecosystem of what it looks like right now. We're one provincial health authority divided in 4 regional health zones, which most of our research efforts are concentrated in our central zone, which is where Halifax is. So we have about 150 academic, industrial, or government partners that share within over 30 plus disciplines. We have about 520 research staff and scientists. So this includes academic coordinators, research coordinators, clinicians, clinical managers, and 260 research investigators that are leading those clinical studies. Currently, we have 17,500 plus patients that are currently enrolled in clinical trials, and there are about 400 to 500 of them that are active annually. And all these clinical trials and research efforts are reviewed by our REB, which constitutes 94 members that are divided into 4 working groups. So essentially we have an REB meeting once a week. And in total, when we count all our clinical trials and other research efforts, we have about 1,400 plus active research studies at any given time. And this number has been increasing over the last few years. So speaking about our ongoing challenges, as I mentioned, 99% of our clinical trials are currently taking place in Central Zone, which really restricts access to clinical trials for people that are outside of Halifax or the HRM. So this is because Nova Scotia Health currently lacks the appropriate resources at smaller regional sites to conduct trials. And this really results in reduced available patient pool and the organization's ability to provide novel therapeutic treatments to Nova Scotians. It also makes it extremely difficult to recruit and retain new investigators when these resources are very limited. We also have very siloed clinical processes. So as Freya mentioned in her talk, all the processes are very complex and very different depending on who you spoke to. And so we're very structured this way, where we have different research units that are actually very excellent in terms of what they do. But the problem is that the time to complete contracts, time for staff recruitment, time for patient registration process varies among these different research groups, which creates inconsistencies when you look at Nova Scotia Health as a whole. And these inefficient processes also lack standardization and centralization. We also have, due to these siloed clinical trial processes, there's no money to invest in infrastructure support to grow beyond what we currently do. And there's also minimal reporting through research and innovation leadership. So it's very difficult for us to know in this current state what we do, who we partner with, and all of the different performance metrics and performance management that we should be reporting to. And here at the bottom, you see a linear process. So in a lot of these siloed clinical trial processes, a lot of the time that it takes to go from one end to prepare and design a clinical trial all the way to study closure is a very linear process. And this is what we're looking to change. Can we actually combine those to actually create faster processes? So this is where the clinical trial unit comes into place. So we've been thinking about this for the past year with a group of our design team, which consists of a lot of our program managers in research. So we have certain guiding principles when we think of Nova Scotia as a whole in terms of research. We want to integrate clinical research into the healthcare continuum, because really when you think about it, research is care and it should be embedded into our healthcare system, not set apart as a separate entity in itself, which is what we are currently structured as. We also want to create nimble and frictionless environment to make it easier for researchers to partner with us and to do research with us, so that we can foster a vibrant health innovation ecosystem. And so really what we want to be is to be the partner of choice for clinical trials. And we want to do that by improving access to clinical trials for our population. So essentially for the health, social, and economic benefits of all Nova Scotians. We also want to drive efficiency and innovation to deliver high quality clinical trials. And this is where standardization and centralization of processes come into place. We want to grow our research investments from industry sponsors and granting agencies. So as we get more research investments, we can reinvest those into our researchers and into our research efforts. And then in the end, we want to develop a business model to optimize revenue and achieve operational stability. So really, this is to merge a lot of our processes together so that we can share resources and really share all these things together. So different opportunities for growth that we really do see with the implementation of a clinical trials unit is that research as care really informs clinical practice. So we only have to gain from the information and the research results that we get. We also have more alignment between chosen clinical trials and provincial health priorities. We can also create consistency and standardization along with accountability and transparency of our processes. This would also increase Nova Scotian participation in clinical research. So we hope through communication strategies that we can improve participation in a lot of our clinical research endeavors. We want to generate real world evidence to understand the translational value of these innovations within our healthcare system. So to translate an idea into something that we can use every single day. And we also hope by doing this to develop and attract top talent researchers and new partnerships, and to retain a lot of the talent that we do have right now, and also to drive research revenue to reinvest into infrastructure and to create an innovative ecosystem that enables the establishment of research spinoffs. So far, it's been a lot of design work. So we're really at the early stages of the clinical trials unit. So a few of our implementation successes so far. So we've had a lot of stakeholder engagement. So working sessions with research leadership. So as I mentioned, our research leadership team, clinical trials working groups. We've had engagement sessions with different clinical trial units across Canada. We've also done a lot of document assessments, so review of different operations. So what are our current processes? Let's map those out. What are the states of our clinical trial documentation? Are there redundancies? We've also done focus group interviews with our research managers, clinical research managers, and to see what their thoughts were. How do they think their clinical trials are doing? What would they like to see? Because really, in the end, we're doing this for the front line, right? How they can conduct their clinical trials better and increase the number of clinical trials that they do to deliver care to patients. And we've also been very lucky to have executive buy-in. So our executive leadership team over at Nova Scotia Health has had been very excited to hear about this clinical trials unit. So we've had frequent pulse check going on throughout the year to make sure that what we were implementing was aligning with the rest of the institution. A lot of our metrics that went into the design were really from a few different sources. And I just wanted to take a moment just to see where all these data analytics that really powered the design behind the clinical trials unit. We've had, as I mentioned, focus groups with our clinical managers, which was very informative in terms of identifying redundancies and efficiencies, a lot of like the red tape that we currently have and how we can perhaps take those down. We could have identified gaps and pain points. What kind of infrastructure supports do our team needs? So as administrator, we might think we know what they want, but really we want them to tell us what they want. And we're also looking at missed opportunities and partnerships that we could have had. A lot of the data analytics actually came from our Romeo database and the RAB. So what we've been able to extract from that are all our PIs. Who are our PIs that work with us? Who are our partners, our industry, academic partners? How many multi-jurisdictional clinical trials do we actually do? Cycle times for the RAB and contracts. We link to SAP, so for financial information. This was one of the main links, so we can extract clinical trial information only. What is the diversity of the research that we do and the distribution of this research across Nova Scotia, which we learned wasn't very great? How many patients are enrolled and the different sources of funding? So this really helped us to build an ecosystem in our current state. And we've also used SAP for all the financial information to really inform us as to the redundancies, identifying fee structures. So how are different research groups doing this? What kind of revenue we're generating versus what we're losing, overhead costs and cost breakdowns, and also identifying a lot of the redundancies that we see between groups. Now moving forward, we're currently designing our implementation plan. So as I mentioned, we're still very early stages. So we still have a lot of stakeholder engagement to do. So to develop effective industry relationships and research partners. So far we've engaged with Merck to see what their needs were, how we can work better together. We drive engagement and promotion of public involvement in clinical trials. So right now our communications team has been fantastic in being active on Twitter and social media to try and engage our community, our Nova Scotians, so that they know what's going on in terms of clinical trials and research in Nova Scotia. We're also doing a website redesign. So if any of you have ever been to our website, you probably know that it's a little bit clunky. So we're planning on redesigning that so it's easier to have access to information. We're also going to build capacity by launching different databases. So for patient registries and clinical trial registries, so that we have fast information to these kinds of essential pieces to form partnerships. We want to expand capacity and infrastructure to conduct clinical trials across the different health zones. So to span out of central zone and to go into the other zone to provide health to those different populations. We also want to initiate a REB pre-review process. So this is really to identify any institutional risk. And then we want to streamline the startup process. So this is where I mentioned that we had a very linear process on how to start up clinical trials. Well, perhaps we can combine those and do things in parallel rather than linearly. So how do we design that? We also want to focus on talent development. So how can we bring our workforce and make them better through effective human resources action plans? So develop a suite of education and training resources to really help our research staff grow. And then our last aspect is the business development. So really to profile researchers to attract new partnerships, expand some of our network integration into other Canadian research networks or global networks, enlist university and hospital research partners. And we've also talked about engaging in innovating contract modeling to make it easier for contract cycle times. And so with this, these are our contact information for the Research Ethics Board, and also my personal contact information if anyone has any questions. So now I give this back to Hope.
Thank you very much, Marie. Our next presenter will be Terry Fleming.
Hello. And just want to say thank you to Marie and Karen for the kind introductions today and for the invitation to be here today. So I'm joining you today from Victoria, where I'm grateful to be a visitor on the traditional and unceded territories of the Lekwungen speaking peoples, also known as the Songhees Nation. As mentioned by Karen earlier, in BC, we've had a harmonized approach to research ethics for a number of years now, and I want to spend a little time sharing our journey with you, as well as some of the key learnings we've had along the way. But first, just a little bit about Research Ethics BC itself. Research Ethics BC is one of the units in the BC Academic Health Science Network. BC AHSN connects the province's health research expertise and resources to deliver high priority, high impact innovations into the health system. And at Research Ethics BC, we do this by supporting researchers and institutions in the province in their research ethics journey. We do not actually conduct ethical reviews at Research Ethics BC, but we support the 22 research ethics boards in the network. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a bit. So, the landscape in BC when it comes to conducting research is as varied and rich as our natural environment. We have a selection of universities and colleges, as well as 5 regional health authorities, and more provincial level services like the BC Children's and Women's Hospitals and BC Cancer, which generally has a location in each health authority region. You add this together and you have quite a motivated group when it came to finding a harmonized approach. In the beginning of harmonization efforts, each of the health authorities often worked in a dyad relationship with one of the universities on applications that affected both of their institutions. This could be a joint research ethics board for those applications, such as what University of Victoria and Island Health had at one time, or an agreement on who would review first and then pass on their draft provisos to the other institution's RAB. And while the dyads may have worked out a good process between them, if you added in another institution, the multi-jurisdictional review process could become quite cumbersome for the researcher, as well as for the research ethics boards involved. Our journey began in 2011 with a grant from the Michael Smith Foundation for Health Research. A project manager was put in place and a reciprocity agreement was developed between the institutions. The agreement basically said that they were all committing to finding a way toward true harmonized research ethics reviews. Institutional support from the original 12 RABs resulted in engagement with RAB administrators and chairs from the institutions and the creation of the BC Ethics Harmonization Initiative, and eventually models for minimal and above minimal risk reviews. The reviews were work intensive for the RAB administrators because of different technology systems in each institution, and some were paper and email based. This led to priority of developing the platform, as we call it. Our funding was exhausted, but we obtained one final small grant to enable the use of RISE, the solution used by the University of British Columbia and its affiliated institutions to conduct ethical reviews. We created the Provincial Research Ethics Platform within RISE and launched it just as we were asked to join the BC Academic Health Science Network. The timing was perfect because we were down to having continued support of the initiative only by the sheer will and determination of the RAB administrators involved. With joining BC AHSN, we now had formal support to continue our provincial formal support to continue, and we started with key stakeholder events and created our provincial advisory council with varied expertise, including researchers, leadership from educational institutions, representatives from Indigenous communities, patient and public members, and representatives from the health authorities. 2020, we were diverted, unfortunately, from our original intentions for moving forward on Indigenous research ethics in the province. But we are back on track now, and our work continues to support RABs with education, development of common guidance, and engagement. The platform, the RISE that we call PrEP, ensures that all researchers are working with the same forms and interface. It was designed in such a way that each institution is able to maintain autonomy while participating collaboratively. RABs and administrators cannot see applications or research that does not impact their institution. There are two applications, one for clinical research and one behavioral, available in RISE and seamless for researchers who are familiar with using RISE prior to harmonization. The increase in efficiency for the researcher was available when we had the email version of the harmonized review, but it was very work intensive for the RABs, as I mentioned. Now, just avoiding email to share information is a huge time saver. The last element is very important as it enables tracking, reports, and metrics. Prior to the platform, it was a manual exercise to collect data from all the institutions each year just to determine how many harmonized applications we had processed. Now I'm going to tell you a little bit about our models and how they work. Because of how we evolved, our models are collaborative. It is really important that the institutions that have research under their auspices are involved during initial review of the study. So the process for minimal risk study is that once the researcher submits their application in the platform, the system decides the board of record, and the board of record does the heavy lifting of the review, as demonstrated in this diagram. In order to ensure the involvement of all RABs, once reviewed, their draft provisos are shared in the platform, and the other RABs can add their local requirements. The researcher receives one unified response and one certificate of approval once all provisos have been met. The minimal risk model was piloted from 2015 and was email-based until incorporated into the platform in the fall of 2018. When it comes to continuing review items such as annual renewals, amendments, and safety reporting, the Board of Record will conduct a delegated review on behalf of all involved unless there is a change in level of risk. If there is a change to the level of risk, then the other RABs are involved in the same way as for the original review. The above minimal risk model only differs because of the full board meeting convened by the Board of Record. And then the other affected REBs can include at least one member at that meeting or submit their provisos prior to the meeting. They all have access to the application and documents submitted in the platform well in advance of the meeting. Once again, the researcher receives one certificate of approval at the end of this process. The Board of Record is the most frequent question we have. How is that determined? So for the researcher, they complete the application form and indicate which institutions are involved and how. This was one of our biggest pieces of work to all agree between the institutions how the Board of Record would be determined that did not require a case-by-case consideration every time. And which was done for quite some time before formalizing the harmonized review processes. Generally, it is based on the REB for the location of the research activities themselves. The other factors are whether it is based in a hospital or requires access to patients or their data. And lastly, if it can be determined based on the specific population or therapeutic area. All cancer studies in the province are reviewed by only BC Cancer, and we are working in a similar approach to pediatric clinical trials, only requiring a review at BC Children's and Women's Hospitals Research Ethics Board. But how we got to this decision involved changing who was in the room. We moved away from a committee that involved people at various levels in their institutions, and we got the REB administrators and managers, as well as a few Research Ethics Board chairs, into a more of a working group situation. We were called an advisory committee, and I was very fortunate to be the chair of this committee for several years. But we really owned the processes that we were developing, and that ownership was what resulted in us getting to know each other and coming to an agreement. So what does it mean when it comes to numbers of reviews? As you can see here, there has been year-on-year growth of harmonized studies in the platform since we launched in the fall of 2018. One of my colleagues mentioned to me just recently that 90% of their health authority studies are now harmonized studies with at least one other institution in BC. Over the past 3 years, we have added 10 more institutions to our network. Primarily educational institutions such as universities and colleges, but also the First Nations Health Authority. There are now 22 REBs working on harmonized research ethics in BC, with the ones in blue, Douglas College, Royal Roads University, and Vancouver Island University joining us only a few short weeks ago. So I just want to talk to you a little bit about the differences and some of the challenges we came across. Shaping a common vision, it really took hard work, empathy, and inquisitiveness. Something that could have been seen as a barrier to harmonization was that not all institutions are at the same stage in the development of their REBs. There were different perspectives by institutions, health authorities having patient populations, and you balance that with educational institutions that with their need for academic freedom. It meant that coming to a common understanding of why we were working together took a number of years of relationship building, and the right commitment from leadership to allow the people who worked in research ethics every day to make decisions about how it could be improved. Now, at the start of the pandemic, the REBs worked hard with our REBC to create a pool of reviewers that could be available if an REB was struggling due to clinical priorities of their members. This has been utilized even very recently with key personnel in health authorities now being drawn into the vaccine clinics. A rapid review process for COVID-19 studies that meant a clinical study that could impact patient treatment immediately would receive a review in 5 days that involved all health authorities. As mentioned by my colleagues earlier, there was spread across the province as to how people were involved in research, and not very many in some of the more remote areas. So this would allow us to make sure that at least one barrier was withdrawn when we're looking at something that was a novel treatment for COVID-19, to make sure that it had ethical review in all of the health authorities at that time. The development of a BC COVID-19 research inventory at the BC Academic Health Science Network is available provincially as a resource for policymakers and granting agencies to examine over the 600 studies in the inventory for gaps in priority areas that came up during the pandemic. And this was developed only because of collaboration with all of the REBs, and they're providing information to us so that we would have one consistent listing in the province of what research was going on in COVID-19. Additionally, the partnership with the First Nations Health Authority started very early in 2020 with the creation of a part-time role at Research Ethics BC for the Senior Advisor on Indigenous Research Ethics. This partnership has continued and expanded, and one of our co-chairs in the Advisory Council is a leader at the First Nations Health Authority. So, challenges along the way. Developing that trust and trusting that harmonized review did not necessarily mean that there would be jobs lost. There is always enough work to go around. And for-profit sponsored clinical trials continue to be a bit of a square peg in a round hole in our platform, mainly due to the differences in how the study can be conducted at different health authorities. Not all, as mentioned by my colleagues earlier as well, not all of them have supported clinical trial units embedded within the health authority. Communications with researchers is always a challenge. We are trying to be a central resource for researchers to tap into, working on more of a web and social media presence. Research being conducted under the auspices of. This definition can be problematic and could be seen as, in my opinion, too many cooks in the kitchen when it is not necessary. We are encouraging the members of our network to adopt a policy that gives reciprocity to another institution to conduct the REB review without them being involved in certain circumstances, such as when the only involvement of their institution is based on a research team member having an affiliation. This may be very useful to be able to move a file quickly if full reciprocity is given, but does this really mean that it's harmonized review? Another conversation that we're starting to have. Or should it be even more clearly stated that if a study is approved for conduct involving an affiliated member from another institution, for example, that their institution did not require their ethical review at their institution because it was reviewed sufficiently by another member of our network of REBs. And lastly, the overlap or perceived overlap between the review processes, ethics and operations. So operations could be contracts, it can be putting in place the privacy agreements if they're necessary, that type of thing. And I think that during the pandemic, researchers continued to submit to research ethics, seeing it as the one-stop shop for approvals for their research, when in fact it was just the starting point. An ethical approval in a health authority may not necessarily mean that the research can be accommodated operationally. And this leads to some challenges when you have the ethics approval, but now you're dealing with the other approvals that are necessary. So what does this mean for Research Ethics BC in our future? I think overall, harmonization in research ethics allows us to at least all be playing the same instrument family and allows us the autonomy with our collaborative model to choose our own violin or ukulele, for example. And lastly, just some contact information for our team at Research Ethics BC is available on this slide. And as you can see here, we have our website, and I would welcome any questions at this time.
Thank you so much, Terry. I'll send it over now to Samantha Drover.
Great, thank you so much for the introduction, Hope, and for including Chair in today's webinar. I'm just now pulling up the slides. So as part of today's webinar, I will be talking about the CHAIR project, or the Canadian Collaboration for Child Health, Efficiency and Excellence in the Ethics Review of Research. The CHAIR project is supported by the CIHR Institute of Human Development, Child and Youth Health, and the CIHR Institute of Genetics. Here's a summary of the presentation I'll give today. I'll start out with an overview of the CHAIR project. Next, I'll move on to the history and context of CHAIR. Third, I'll discuss CHAIR's approach to streamlining research ethics review. And finally, I'll comment on some challenges and successes to date. So to start, I'll give an overview of the main aim of the CHAIR project, as well as a summary of the structure of and the engagement with this initiative. And later on in this presentation, I will go into a few more details about the specific deliverables or goals of this initiative. The CHAIR project aims to improve child health in Canada by enhancing and expediting child health research. CHAIR is funded by a 5-year CIHR grant to streamline research ethics review across Canada for child health studies. And the timeline of the grant is April 2020 to March 2025, so the CHAIR project is relatively new. The CIHR grant funding CHAIR requires working towards a single REB review for child health multi-site studies in coordination with existing provincial arrangements. The project is based at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario, but CHAIR is very much a cross-Canada initiative with collaborators, co-investigators, and stakeholders hailing from across the country. This slide gives you a quick, or will give you a quick idea of all the expertise involved in the CHAIR initiative. The cross-Canada team includes 35 co-investigators and collaborators with a breadth of expertise in numerous topics, including REB review and management, child health research and clinical trials, privacy and data linkage, Indigenous populations, patient, family, and youth engagement, and then among many other topics. The principal investigators of CHAIR are Susan Marlin, Richard Carpentier, and Terry Lacaze. We have an REB advisory committee with representation from 21 REBs across Canada. The Strategic Implementation Advisory provides advice to CHAIR on strategies to successfully achieve the goals of the project. Antonia Palmer, who will be presenting on another harmonization effort after me, also leads the CHAIR Patient and Family Advisory Committee, which has the goal of providing support, guidance, mentoring, and education for patient, family, and lay representatives of REBs. The operational management team meets regularly to manage the development, implementation, and evaluation of all project deliverables. And finally, the management, administration, communication, and technical aspects of CHAIR are supported by this group, which includes myself as project manager. In addition to the CHAIR committees that I just reviewed, I'd like to highlight the supporters of CHAIR, including 16 pediatric hospitals and research institutes, 23 research intensive networks, Health Canada, Children's Healthcare Canada. And knowledge users of CHAIR include Santé et Services Sociaux Québec, Health Canada, Children's Healthcare Canada, and the Newfoundland and Labrador Health Research Ethics Authority. Now that we have a brief overview of the CHAIR project, I will move into providing some more context for this initiative. So there are many existing or ongoing efforts to streamline research ethics review within or even across other countries, as we know. And just to give a few examples, in the US, all multi-site domestic studies sponsored by the NIH and involving humans are reviewed by a single institutional review board, or IRB, and this has been the case since January 2018. In the European Union, currently multi-country studies require a single research ethics committee review or approval in each country, but the EU is moving towards one single review. Australia has had a national mutual acceptance of research ethics review since 2011, with the exception of the Northern Territory and Tasmania. And finally, as a last example, Japan allows centralized research ethics review processes for clinical trials, but the process is not mandatory and does not apply everywhere. Moving specifically to Canada, as you are well aware just from the great presentations today, there are a number of research ethics review streamlining or harmonization efforts within the country. So I'll just briefly summarize some of those efforts that have not already been or will not be discussed as part of today's webinar. So Alberta has consolidated the number of REBs and is involved in both within and cross-province research ethics streamlining initiatives. For example, the Alberta Health Research Ethics Reciprocity Agreement of 2016 and the Western Canadian Agreement of 2012. Moving east in Saskatchewan, REBs in province have moved to a policy of full reciprocity, and the province is also involved in cross-province ethics streamlining initiatives such as the Western Canadian Agreement. Ontario has a voluntary streamlined research ethics review platform with a single research ethics approval for multi-site studies through Clinical Trials Ontario. In Quebec, health research involving more than one institution undergoes only one ethics review, which is recognized by all participating institutions. And this streamlining is mandated by the Ministry of Health and Social Services. And finally, as a last example, all health research in Newfoundland is reviewed by the Provincial Health REB as part of the Health Research Ethics Authority Act of 2011. So clearly there is much expertise and knowledge regarding streamlining research ethics review in Canada. Now moving on to some context a bit more specific to CHAIR. In January of 2019, CIHR hosted a community stakeholder engagement workshop to consult stakeholders with an interest in advancing a collaborative pediatric research ethics initiative. The participants of this workshop included approximately 50 hospital and research institute leaders and senior administrators, ethics specialists, representatives from Health Canada, provincial health ministries and health authorities, and other interested federal and provincial bodies. A number of key themes emerged from this workshop, which became part of the call for grants to which CHAIR responded and by which CHAIR is funded. So regarding the Pediatric Research Ethics Initiative, some key themes included that there should be a streamlined research ethics review process with the goal of a single review. The research ethics review should be separated from other parts of the approval process. There should be mindful consideration of different provincial needs and processes. And finally, educational resources should be developed to support the research ethics review. And lastly, this initial streamlining effort should focus specifically on promoting child health research. The pediatric or child health context is key for the CHAIR initiative for a number of reasons. First, concerns about protecting children lead to their exclusion from clinical trials. Most drug therapies prescribed for children have not been evaluated for safety and effectiveness in the pediatric population. Small sample sizes or patient populations increase the need for multi-site studies, and this is particularly the case for rare diseases in children. And finally, there are unique assent and consent challenges in child health research. Now, given the global and Canadian context for research ethics streamlining, and in particular, the importance of streamlining research ethics for child health research, I will now move on to CHAIR's approach to streamlining research ethics review. So here's a figure summarizing the main deliverables or activities of the CHAIR project. As a reminder, CHAIR aims to be a cross-province streamlined ethics review process for multi-site studies, and it has a goal of achieving a single ethics review for child health studies in Canada. To address this aim, the CHAIR project has 4 main deliverables. The first is a web-based collaborative research ethics review platform. This includes an electronic ethics system for submitting and reviewing research ethics forms. It will also include a pediatric-specific or a set of pediatric-specific assent and consent form templates, and template or sample agreements for delegating review to an REB of record. The second deliverable is an REB assessment program, and we're working on this deliverable in a phased manner. The first phase will be based on the existing Clinical Trials Ontario or CTO qualification program. And the second phase will be revised based on the needs of the CHAIR Collaborative and in consultation with external stakeholders. The third deliverable is a research ethics education program. There are a number of prongs to this deliverable, including child health ethics educational modules, supports for patients and family members or lay members on REBs, and resources for common issues and challenges encountered during the research ethics review process. Finally, each of those 3 deliverables will feed into the fourth, which is a final report with recommendations. The CHAIR project received CIHR funding beginning in April 2020. And as you can see in this timeline, we are currently in the pilot and ongoing development stage of each of the 3 first deliverables. As part of this pilot and ongoing development stage, we're working with a small number of multi-site child health research studies that will soon be submitting research ethics applications through CHAIR to pilot the CHAIR systems, policies, and supports. Lessons learned from those CHAIR pilot research studies will feed back into the continued ongoing evaluation and development of each of the main deliverables. In addition to studies that come through later, we'll continue to feed back into developing each of those deliverables. And finally, at the end of the CHAIR project, all of the lessons learned will feed into the final report with recommendations. Although CHAIR is in its relatively early stages, I'm happy to say we already have some successes to share And of course, we are also learning lessons along the way and working to tackle challenges. Some of the important successes to share include progress on each of those first 3 deliverables. On the first deliverable, the web-based research ethics review platform, we have launched the electronic research ethics forums this past December, which means that from the perspective, at least of the online ethics application, CHAIR is ready to accept those few initial pilot research studies. And this includes forms for both clinical trials and observational studies. Still a part of deliverable 1, we have gathered pediatric specific assent and consent templates from RIBs across Canada. And based on those samples, our CHAIR Assent Consent Working Group is drafting CHAIR pediatric specific assent and consent templates. Similarly, we have gathered international and Canadian sample agreements for delegating to an RIB of record. And from that, we are drafting a CHAIR RIB sample agreement to delegate to an RIB of record. On the second deliverable, the RIB assessment program, a draft of the CHAIR qualification program is being reviewed by the CHAIR RIB Advisory Committee, and we are meeting individually with members of RIBs across Canada to gain their input on this draft program. We plan to qualify a number of RIBs from across Canada this year, and we're currently working with a small number of research studies to pilot CHAIR, including this RIB assessment program. Now, pertaining to the third deliverable, the Research Ethics Education Program, we have received more than 220 responses from RIB members, researchers, and patients and family members on a Research Ethics Education Needs Assessment Survey. This survey was tailored to address research ethics issues relevant to child health research and will inform the development of the educational modules. The Patient and Family Advisory Committee, led by Antonia Palmer, was formed this past fall, and they are currently collecting data from an interview-based educational needs assessment for lay and community RIB members. Moving forward, an important priority will be collecting lessons learned from piloting the CHAIR system policies and supports to inform local differences and needs with respect to engaging with CHAIR and accepting research ethics reviews from other jurisdictions, the qualification of RIBs across Canada, and the continued development of CHAIR systems, policies, and supports. It will also be important to work with and/or address legislative barriers to accepting research ethics reviews from another jurisdiction. Although there is certainly a lot of work that lays ahead, we have wonderful cross-Canada engagement of RIB members, child health researchers, research ethics leadership, family patient advocates, data privacy experts, regulatory agencies, federal research funders, and research institutions and hospitals. And the continued engagement of these groups will be the key to success for the CHAIR project. To summarize this presentation, CHAIR is a cross-Canada initiative to streamline the research ethics review process for multi-site studies with the goal of achieving a single research ethics review for child health studies in Canada. A key to success will be the continued engagement of RIB members, child health researchers, patients and families, and other key stakeholders in child health research from across Canada. Please feel free to visit our website, chairchildhealth.ca, to learn more about this project, and feel free to email me at sd80@queensy.ca. I would like to acknowledge all those involved with and supporting the CHAIR initiative, including the CHAIR team, principal investigators, co-investigators, and collaborators across the country, the CHAIR committee, supporters, and knowledge users. And finally, I'd like to acknowledge the CHR Institutes funding this project. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Samantha. And we're going to end the round of presentations with Antonia Palmer.
Thank you so much. Sure. So I thought before I started, what I would do is just give a slight introduction in terms of the perspective that I bring, which is a little bit different than to my colleagues. But I look at the lens of research ethics through that of my experience with my son, who was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 2. And with that diagnosis came the enrollment on multiple clinical trials, both for frontline therapy and for relapse therapy. But for 5 years being enrolled on clinical trials, which were mostly therapeutic in nature, but also biologic and supportive care, in which our family was also, members of our family were also enrolled on clinical trials. So it's really through that experience that I started to look more sort of with curiosity about the research landscape within Canada, specifically within the world of cancer, and even more specifically within the world of pediatric oncology, but then getting involved as a lay member for the Ontario Cancer Research Ethics Board, or OCREB, being a part of the CARE project, which I'll talk about today, the Pan-Canadian Approach to Research Ethics Review, and as Sam just talked about in terms of the CHAIR project. So RIB streamlining, my colleagues prior really spoke very eloquently about the importance of it in the efficiency, the access, the resource utilization, standardization, and just the benefits for provinces and centers across Canada in terms of being able to attract and retain both talent and clinical trials themselves. And I think, unfortunately, research ethics gets a lot of blame when there's delay or challenges that occur in the research process. But that's not the only place that delays and challenges occur. And I think that's a really important thing to say, is that research ethics shouldn't have the brunt of that blame. But it is a very critical step in the process and can really benefit from optimization, which is what all of these initiatives are focused on. So to bring that into context, I'd really love to provide this example of why. And this example of why is about an initiative called Profile, or Precision Oncology for Young People. So Profile is an initiative which examines the molecular profiling of relapse refractory and hard to treat pediatric cancers. So it involves the genetic, the genomic, the proteomic, really the very deep omic analysis of pediatric cancers that are very, very difficult and are seeing very low cure rates, to really understand as much as we can about those particular disease types, as well as the treatments which could be optimized for them. So in order for Profile to move forward, and the way that they really wanted to be able to push the science forward was to create a protocol which would take patient samples of the cancer, have those samples go through that deep omic review, look at what comes back from that analysis, if there is an understanding of if there are some characteristics or genomic changes to the cancer that could be targeted, and really trying to then the tumor board to look at that information and to try and figure out if there could be treatments which could be optimized and really personalized for those patients. So to have that protocol and that clinical trial open at the 16 pediatric centers across Canada, it meant that that protocol was reviewed at all 16 individual ethics boards. So the first submission to the REB happened in February 2018. And because of resources, the submissions couldn't happen to the 16 ethics boards simultaneously. So what happened is they were submitted in series and not in parallel. So at around June 2018, about half of the sites were approved, and unfortunately the last site was approved in fall of 2020. So what this meant was that it was more than 2.5 years from start to finish, just if you looked at that research ethics process by itself. And that was certainly challenging, in that what it meant was that children in Ontario were able to get access to the Profile clinical trial much sooner than children in other provinces, and really creating that inequity of access. So because of this, and I think Profile is a really important example to consider, in that what patients are really hearing far too often, and this is potentially more specific to pediatric oncology, but really generalizable across child health and even adult health, is hearing things like, we can't get access to that clinical trial in Canada, or we're working on getting access and we're working on opening it up, but it's just taking longer than expected. Or for those clinical trials that we're trying to bring from the US, sorry, but by the time the clinical trial was opened here in Canada, it had already closed to accrual. Or just simply, we just don't have the resources to open that clinical trial. And so I think as patients are hearing these things, patients and caregivers are really noticing these challenges now more than ever before. And I think patients and caregivers are really also asking why these challenges are happening. And patients and caregivers, like me, are getting more directly involved and really trying to understand the research landscape, the value of health research, and the different pieces that occur within that process, like research ethics. So, and I can't speak to all patients and families, but I think I speak in generality and for the majority, but that research participants absolutely 100% care that research is ethically sound and has been ethically approved. But do research participants and patients and families care that the ethical review of research was conducted by a particular board? I don't think so. And that's not the feedback that I hear. You know, research participants and families and caregivers, they really assume that a research study, if it was reviewed at one REB in Canada, that it would be reviewed with the same ethical standards as if it was reviewed at a different REB in Canada. So in terms of the patient and participant experience, really it's not about who conducts the ethical review. This is certainly important in certain contexts, such as with Indigenous communities. But it is really understanding that the ethical review and who conducts it is that it's about the fact that the ethical review is conducted, not who and not who it's by. And that clinical trials means that science is moving forward. And this is something exceptionally important to the patient and participant experience. And that when clinical trials are not available, that's when trust breaks down. And I'd like to loop that one back to the profile experience and that example is that what was happening for patients and families who did not have the profile clinical trial open within their province when it was open in others, were unfortunately spending thousands of dollars having their child's tumor genetically and genomically analyzed in independent institutions and businesses in order to be able to get that information, which then set up some very unfortunate challenges between the family and their care team when they saw that that science was not available to them within their home institution. So there is a really strong element of trust that can be quite eroded very strongly when that access is not available. So it is about getting that equitable access, and Marie talked about that very eloquently earlier today. So with that, that has really been the foundation and all of this with the CARE project. Again, that's the pan-Canadian approach to research ethics. And the way it all started was in April 2018, Cancer Care in Manitoba reached out to the Ontario Cancer Research Ethics Board, OCREB, to talk about the possibility of looking at streamlining between the two provinces in the area of cancer research ethics. And separately, in May 2018, Research Manitoba reached out to OCREB to discuss research improvements, as we've heard about from Freo and RITHIM, and the potential of collaboration. And some initial discussions started to happen about what that might look like. So through that, we formed the CARE team, and that included members from the University of Manitoba Research Ethics Board, Cancer Care Manitoba, Research Manitoba, OCREB, and a very persistent patient partner, me. So our objectives were to create an interprovincial pilot between Ontario and Manitoba to expand the concept of a centralized REB for adult and pediatric cancer studies, to really create a staged and iterative approach to understanding the challenges and benefits of streamlining research ethics reviews across the provinces. And in that iterative process, to really identify what the barriers and solutions and benefits were to looking at various models of cooperation between the provinces, and really a strong recognition that one size will not fit all, and we'll have to really figure out in a very organic way what is going to be the best way to be able to work together. So in terms of our process, we really very carefully and thoughtfully developed a project plan. There were many introductory meetings to be able to establish a way to move forward, to start to develop that team and to create the element of trust. And as Terry talked about, that shaping of a common vision, which was really important to us to make sure that everybody was on the same page, and we had many different stakeholders. And really that co-determination of strategy on how to move forward. And we felt the best way to move forward was really to start with the facilitated review process. So for OCREB to share completed reviews of studies that were in the queue to be reviewed by the University of Manitoba REB. And that way, the University of Manitoba could look at the OCREB materials either prior to a review, maybe during a review, or even after a review to see how they compared, were they useful, were there similarities, and where there were differences in terms of the ethical consideration when reviewing a study. And to do the facilitated review for both pediatric and adult studies, and to do multiple facilitated reviews to ensure that we developed a really strong comfort level, that we really understood where there was convergence and divergence. And then the thought in terms of the next stage of the process was to move to the reciprocal or delegated review when ready. So for that process, really what that would mean is with the first REB, OCREB would conduct the review of the study in compliance with their normal procedures. And then following that approval, the receiving REB, the University of Manitoba, would recognize the prior review and accept the review or conduct that delegated review within their own board. So we knew that there were at the time that there are other initiatives happening. The first one was the National Cancer Institute Common Consent Template, which was being developed. This has been accepted now and is in use, but at the time we were waiting for approval from CCTG to be able to use that common consent template, which had been developed through extensive consultation and study with patients, patient partners, researchers, and many stakeholders. And as we heard about, there was also the RITHIM initiative and CHIPPR and the CHEER initiative also happening. So we were trying to also be very careful and cognizant of the other pieces and parts that were moving to make sure that we were really all working together. So just in terms of a basic timeline, the initial communication started in 2018. The facilitated reviews started later in that year. Luckily, there was a face-to-face meeting with members of OCREB going to Manitoba to be able to meet in person. There are multiple facilitated reviews, adult and pediatric, and forming the care team in about September 2019 with the signed Reciprocity agreement for the two provinces finalized around April 2020. So we had some great learnings from the facilitated review. And really what we learned first was that there was good alignment on the ethical considerations that were raised between OCREB and the University of Manitoba REB. The one place where we learned that there were more differences was within the communication of risks to participants in the consent form. So the University of Manitoba, their practice was to list the risks for all drugs or interventions that were involved in the clinical trial. So for those that were experimental and standard of care. But for OCREB, their practice has been the listing of risks for only experimental drugs or interventions in the clinical trial, with the belief and assumption that that patients will be given the information about the risks and side effects of standard of care drugs, usually through their pharmacy care team. And so this was actually we had great discussion on this and how to move forward. And but what it came down to was that really we knew of the other initiative with the common consent template from NCI, and hoping that this would be a great solution in order to move forward with this difference between the two provinces. So recently we had the first test of the Reciprocity agreement, and this happened just in November. one thing with the pandemic is the University of Manitoba just had a really high influx of studies that they were reviewing, and felt that it was a great time to be able to go forward with doing a delegated review just based on their workloads that they were experiencing. So the University of Manitoba, RIB, conducted a delegated review using OCREB review materials that were done prior in terms of the OCREB review itself. And when that was submitted to the Clinical Trial Support Unit, CTSU, of the National Cancer Institute, they challenged the delegated review at the time of activation. So CTSU assumed that OCREB would be the board of record, but our reciprocity agreement did not give OCREB board of record authority over the U of M REB. There are also challenges on alignments of dates and the applications and how that would move forward. And it's really felt like CTSU had a very different definition of what delegated review meant versus the way that we were operating under that of the delegated review. And then unfortunately CTSU would not activate the study for Manitoba. So our resulting action was that the delegated review itself was ratified at the University of Manitoba full REB board meeting. It was documented as a full board review, and resulting with them as the board of record, not OCREB. Of course, documented in the meeting minutes, and because it had to go back to the board, it meant a small unfortunate delay. But certainly we've understood that this is probably the method of moving forward in how we will be able to go forward with the delegated review. So as our next steps, we're continuing with that delegated review process with the University of Manitoba, RIB as the board of record, and really ensuring that there is early communication with sponsors. And that was something that we have also taken away as a learning experience to make sure that we are communicating much earlier with them about the process in terms of doing the delegated review between the two boards and what that means. In parallel, we're also going to be working closer with CTSU to find alignment on issues around delegated review and what that means in terms of definitions and how to move forward. And the fact that we hope that we will be able to move forward with working with other provinces and bringing other provinces into this project. And this is going to be something that we'll be needing to work through on a regular basis. And one other thing that we have just recently in our last meeting talked about was the consideration of a co-review of future applications in a joint board meeting where OCREB would invite the University of Manitoba to a meeting, and we would co-review an application together and co-write a singular letter that both boards would sign. So there's different thoughts about how to move forward, but we have we feel very encouraged by what the next steps are to keep moving forward with the project. So certainly I think everybody's talked about this, but trust is definitely critical when trying to create this streamlining between REBs and in the research ethics process as a whole. It really is the foundation for how we can all work together. Slow and methodical forward process is good, and we have been it's been a very thoughtful way that we have been moving forward and careful, but we are moving forward nonetheless, and that is the most important thing, and hope to continue to move that forward between the work that's being done on the CARE project. We have many different stakeholders, as many of these projects do, and so communication between these multiple stakeholders is definitely not easy, but really a necessity to make sure everybody is understanding of how we move forward. And barriers will be experienced, like that with what we experienced with CTSU, but really should be approached with that common desire to solve them, and we certainly have that will within the CARE project, which is quite exceptional. And keeping research participants in mind through all of this is absolutely key, and making sure that we are remembering that they are the end users of the research, and being able to create that access and get research to them is just absolutely just critical. So I'd just like to say thank you, and if you'd like to reach out at any point, please do. So I think I'm handing this back to Hope now.
Thank you so much, Antonia. We're going to open up for Q&As right now, and we have one question already, and that one is for Freya Arneson from RITHIM. Freya, can you turn your video back on, please? Great.
Can you see me?
Yes.
Okay.
So our question is from a participant. A few of us are attending from University de Saint Boniface, and we wonder whether the tools will be available in French, as their nursing school does produce research. They note that the university was not featured in the RITHIM video, but they do have an institutional RUB.
Okay, thank you very much for the question. I really appreciate you attending the webinar. Yeah, in our video, the diagram that we have isn't completely exhaustive. It was meant to showcase that there are many, many people and organizations or review committees that make up the current system, but it doesn't include absolutely everyone. I would like to say that around the other part of your question, will it be provided in French? We're still working on a lot of the details related to our system. We're still building the system, really focusing on the processes and making sure that the electronic system is ready to go. And so I'd say that I would love to follow up with your organization and have a conversation about what the possibilities are and what that might look like. And so we'll definitely follow up with you on that issue after the webinar.
Thank you, Freya. And please submit any questions you have in the live event Q&A, and we will be able to read them out to the participants. We have another question, which I believe is a general question for everyone, which is, how are the patient caregiver involvement going to be involved through the entire research process and lifetime of a patient?
I wonder, I'm thinking about the whole, I'm not sure, Thomas, if I'm going to be answering this correctly, so please feel free to jump in if in the text, if not. But, patient partnership is a really important piece, and in terms of being able to include patient partners in the entire research process, it can be more than just research ethics where the patient partner is involved. I think that more and more we are seeing patient partnership as a way to be able to, whether it's prioritize research, direct research, design research, being a part of the research ethics, seeing things like even the return of results and looking at patient-facing materials and providing feedback on that. So it's something which is really newly emerging, and we're trying to do better and better with and in multiple contexts. But you're right that that involvement is something which we have to look at through the actual entire research process, from the start to finish, and the entire place and all the places that patients are involved.
Thank you, Antonia. Does anyone else have any input from the RUB side?
Yeah, so in terms of Nova Scotia Health and building the CTU, we haven't done this yet, but we do plan to do it soon, is to create a patient advisory committee. So as we're rolling out our clinical trials unit, one thing that we do want to have is patient perspective. And so in Nova Scotia, what we'll do is reach out to patients and their families and really use their experience to help us inform on how we can do better, especially when we reach our rural communities. So what were their experience? How did they feel? How did researchers and their experience with the whole research enterprise in itself? So I think that new information that we'll be getting will be very valuable in terms of the whole implementation process. Thanks,
Marie. We actually have another question for you, Marie. Janet asks, I wonder if the clinical trial unit plan in Nova Scotia will include the IWK. As a member of a department in Nova Scotia that has researchers who cross over both NSH and IWK REB contracts offices, having a one-stop shopping instead of doing it all twice would be wonderful.
Yeah, we're definitely working towards that. So currently we're separate, and I know it is incredibly frustrating for all our researchers. We recently have a new legal person that works solely for research and innovation, and I hope through this new position we'll be able to start consultation to create a new memorandum of understanding between the IWK and Nova Scotia Health so that we can really streamline this research ethics process. Because for other people on the call who don't know, the IWK and NS Health do share our electronic database system. So for the REB review. So if we're already sharing, we should create some legal mechanism in which we can streamline the research ethics review process.
Great, thanks, Marie. We have another question for Freya, and this is from one of our panelists. Terry. She asks, Freya mentioned that part of the process for RITHIM was legislation changes. Can Freya elaborate on what those changes were?
Sure. So RITHIM's scope of harmonization is a little bit different than some of these other initiatives that have happened across Canada. So here we're looking at including privacy and the institutional impact reviews. So in order for us to include privacy in the way that was envisioned by the community, we are a legislation change is required. Currently in Manitoba, any personal health information and health data that is held by the provincial government needs, if a researcher wants to access that information, they have to apply through a committee called the Health Information Privacy Committee, or HIPC. And so the idea is that under RITHIM, HIPC will eventually become part of the CHIPPR committee so that we are conducting the ethics review and the review around access to that data at the same time. And that requires a legislation change because HIPC is named in the legislation right now. So that legislation is in the process of being reviewed by the government, and we anticipate that that change will happen sometime within the next year. And we've worked really closely with the government department on envisioning what that will look like. And so there will be a phase of RITHIM likely where we will launch, but the legislation won't have changed yet. And in that phase, we've developed a transition plan with our partners, with the HIPC committee, to align our reviews so that the plan is that a researcher would fill out the application form, and then on the back end, it would be sent to HIPC for review. It would be reviewed by ethics, and we would provide the decisions to the researchers that way.
Thank you, Freya. Do any of the other panelists have any questions for the other panelists? If so, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask, and I'll transfer it over.
I'll ask, I mean, Marie, you mentioned about including patient partners and getting their feedback. Freya or Terry, was that something that is or you hope to be able to include in the work that that you're doing?
I can speak a little bit from RITHIM's perspective. So we've engaged with CHI, who have a patient engagement section, and they have provided us with some advice, as well as some patient partners on our communities of practice. So we have a privacy community of practice, and we have 2 patients who sit on that community of practice to bring that perspective into the conversation.
And so I'll just add, similarly, we have patient partners that are part of our actual Research Ethics BC Advisory Council. So they're giving us strategic advice on our plans going forward. And they are also involved in various communities of practice. And one of the most recent ones that we had set up was for a clinical research ethics community of practice. And we're making sure that we have patient voices involved there as well. So, yes.
Okay, we'll give it a few more minutes to see if any audience members have any further questions. And if so, we might, and if not, we might close the event early. Okay, we do have a question now for Antonia. So I'm going to put you on live. If two boards conducting reviews and having one letter, would both REBs be the board of record?
I think what would happen there is they would still be submitted individually. We don't, at this point in time, don't have an agreement between the two provinces which allow for OCREB to be the board of record over Manitoba, the University of Manitoba REB. So they still would be submitted individually, of each board being their own individual board of record for that study. Unfortunately, at this time, I mean, if we can, there is lots of conversation still about how we move forward and do that even differently in the future, but that will be for the next steps later on down the road.
Thank you.
Hope, I think we have another question for Antonia.
Is that my question, Freya?
Yeah.
I think it's my question, Hope. What I was curious about is a follow-up to Antonia's question to Freya, and that is your own experience having patients on OCREB or other REBs, and the your recommendations, your thoughts and recommendations.
Well, certainly, I mean, there is the lay membership on REBs, which is a very important piece, and being able to provide that feedback. So on OCREB in particular, we have there are 4 different lay members who provide feedback on all studies, with 2 focused on more on the adult side and 2 focused on more the pediatric side. As the lay members on the REB, we do get involved in other parts and components of OCREB, whether it's an operational committee, privacy committees. So there's lots of different ways that within an REB structure, and as the example of OCREB in particular, that lay members and as patient partners can get involved to be able to influence directions on how we move forward as an REB. Certainly too, providing lots of expertise and advice on assents and consents and any public facing materials. Those are really critical ways that lay members do get involved as well. And certainly, as we have through the CHEER project, I've been able to create the Patient and Family Advisory Committee, which is a committee of lay members from REBs from across Canada. You know, first of all, coming together to be a community of practice for one another, to really be able to share the challenges that they face when reviewing studies, and to learn from one another and to not work in isolation, which I think is a really critical component, especially for the lay members. I think there is the possibility that you get a little bit isolated sometimes within your role, and it's nice to be able to connect with others to see how they've been dealing with challenges of whether it's the length of a consent form, or how do you deal with the return of genetic results, and and how do you communicate that? Like, there's so many issues that we're all talking about across REBs, but maybe not talking about necessarily very well together. And hopefully the work that we're doing with CHEER is going to be able to create a really nice way of communicating with one another, and then ultimately being able to create the education, and whether it's when you're coming into an REB or whether it's the ongoing training that you need, that really is going to be specifically tailored to the public and lay members who are parts of the research ethics process. So I think it's there are lots of different parts and places, and certainly as Terry and Marie and Freya have talked about as well, with the various patient partner communities and the way that they can get involved. And I think the challenge often is just finding the right patient partners, and research ethics is a very niche area, and so it's just finding the people who really want to be involved to make a difference. And I think that may be more of the challenge than anything. I don't know if anyone else wants to speak to that one.
I think we have a question for Samantha, and that is, are there currently open opportunities for patient community members to participate in CHEER and CARE initiatives?
Well, we have our Patient and Family Advisory Committee lead, Antonia, here, who leads the Patient and Family Advisory Committee. So I guess
I think the answer is yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and certainly it's to get in touch. If this is something that interests you for CARE and CHEER, please absolutely reach out. We would love the diversity of voices of patients and lay members and public members across Canada is really going to be key in how we move initiatives like CHEER and CARE forward. So absolutely, the answer is yes.
We have a question for all panelists, or whoever wants to answer it, which is, what factors are considered when choosing or deciding which REB is the REB of record?
I'd be happy to start if that's okay with my colleagues. So with the Research Ethics BC, or with the model that we have in BC, the algorithm that we've used and designed and agreed upon was that it's primarily based on where is the majority of the research taking place. So which institution is actually hosting the research, or where most of the activity is going to take place. Is that where the patients are? Is that where the data is? That kind of thing. And then the other aspects that we take into consideration is it could be something that is being driven by another institution, but they require the data at the second institution. So if it involves a health authority, that'll have an effect on determining whether or not the board of record is a health authority because of the patient aspect. And then the third thing that we designed in there was expertise. So are we talking about a cancer study? Then it really needs to go to a cancer research ethics board that has that expertise. And so those are just some examples of how that algorithm is designed. But in our system, we also have the ability, because it is electronic, the algorithm decides who should be the board of record based on the information that the researcher has put in through their application. But the research ethics board administrator, when they get that application, they take a really close look at it to see, oh, has the algorithm calculated this correctly? Or are we even the right board to be reviewing this first? They can also take a look at impact on their institution, like if they're very busy at that time, and say, you know what, everything's equal across all of the aspects that we're looking at here. Maybe let's just have a conversation with another REB and ask them if they're willing to be the board of record in this case. And our reciprocity agreement between the institutions allows for that flexibility.
Thank you, Terry. Does anyone else on the panel want to speak to this question? Okay, we have one more question, which is for Freya. And the question is, I wonder if Freya can speak to the new process of impact submission through Shared Health Manitoba. Is this something that will eventually be absorbed by RITHIM?
That's a really good question. I think that the answer is that we are working really closely with Shared Health as a partner to support their lead and coordinate role around impact reviews. So Shared Health has been, and people from Shared Health have been instrumental in helping us build the RITHIM system, what those new processes are going to look like. And they will ultimately be setting the standards for what institutional impact reviews should look like within the health system. However, streamlining those institutional impact reviews is one of the key deliverables for RITHIM. And so we're going to leverage our system and work with Shared Health to streamline those institutional impact reviews through our system. So a researcher will ultimately, when RITHIM is up and running, a researcher will fill out one application form that takes in all of the information that is required for their ethics review, for the institutional impact review, no matter where it's happening in the province, and also for their access to data and privacy questions. And then we will work with Shared Health they will be responsible for setting the standards around what those impact reviews look like. We will have institutional delegates within the health system, and they will receive a copy of a protocol. They will review it for impact, and it will come back into our system. And so for researchers, there's one key point of contact, and that is through the RITHIM system.
Thank you, Freya. We do not have any follow-up questions, and so I think we will close the presentations today. Thank you everyone for attending. If you have further questions that have not been answered, you can email me at hope.nicholson@researchmb.ca and I will direct it to the appropriate party. If that email address is too long to remember, you can just use the contact form on the rithim.ca website. This video will also be uploaded and made publicly available, and all the members who RSVP to this event will be sent a link. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thanks, everyone.